So we are going to get to work on this mummy. Um, and I think I've run out of characters to paint. So we may have to recycle through some witches and spiders and pumpkins and stuff. But let's get to work on her. And I didn't, it was a busy, busy week, so I didn't do the um, captioning on the bottom that's going to tell you the colors. So I'll just repeat them a lot, and you can just ask the question because I can see the comments on the side here. All right, so this is what your girl should look like. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take Prussian blue, and I'm going to get a little bit closer to her, and we are going to float some shading on, a werewolf. Okay, I'll put that on my list. Um, I haven't used Prussian blue in a long time, so I'm going to shake it up a lot. But we're going to take Prussian blue, and you want to blend it out. It's transparent, but you still want to blend it out quite well. And we are going to float some shading on the background around these headstones, around our mummy, around the moon, and let's do that first. So I'm gonna start here. You can bounce around on your background and just shade here and there. If you have a mop brush, it's always kind of fun to mop these floats out and soften them a little bit. So I put this thing on my table today so I could make you dizzy. And but do you see what I'm doing? I'm still just turning the piece. Haven't been trained on this thing lately. So I'm just going to float this Prussian blue all the way around. In the little spots, you can just kind of stick the corner of your brush in there. You just want to get some of this dark color on the background there. I do hope some of you will come and join me at Palooza. I'm going to have a booth too, and it's going to have lots of painted samples for sale because 12 months of painting two of these, you can bet I have quite a few painted samples. So this side. See, like in here, this little area, I'm just going to slide my brush down in there and not really worry that I don't get up next to both sides. I'm just going to slide that brush in there and get some color in there. When you get to these areas that we call V areas, you want to kind of walk that color out. I don't know if you can see that real well, but we're just going to walk it out and kind of round that V area out a little bit. There's another little V area. A werewolf. I'm going to have to get my mind working on that. Okay. Almost around my mummy lady. Normally, when I design something, it almost always starts with the saying first. I'll read something or see a saying, and then I'll go, I can use that. Now, don't forget this area right here. That's by her neck on the left side. You don't want to forget and not float shading in there. Got lots of V areas there. Okay, right. So I'm going to go over here and shade on the background around my moon. I kind of turned my brush up on its edge a little bit so that I didn't get any Prussian blue on my mummy's bandages. We also want to float shading around the outside edge wherever there is blue. So you don't want to shade Prussian blue on the green, obviously. So just all the way around the outside edge. That one should go fairly quick. And of course, you don't want to shade it on the moon. Again, I just turned my brush on its side a little bit to get down here so that I didn't get it on my headstones. I love it when I load the wrong side of the brush and end up with both sides of the brushes having Prussian blue in them. All right, almost done with this shade around the outside. We are going to do some highlighting. We're going to work on, it's going to be dry brushed highlighting with warm white. We have to dry brush warm white a lot of places. So we're going to just kind of bounce around this whole piece, right? So we are going to dry brush some highlighting on her face. And remember, dry brush, you don't put water in it. And if you have your favorite way to dry brush, please, if it works for you, then just use that way. If you want to see how I dry brush, I have a little video on my website and on YouTube. So you could watch that. And don't worry too much about getting this on the bandages. It's okay. So first I want to dry brush down the center of her face, like on the bridge of her nose. And I'm going to go to the outside here by her eyes. I want to dry brush. You can just go in this whole area here where her mouth is, because it'd be kind of hard to go around that stuff. And we're going to do shading, so it'll be just fine. Just touch a little bit on the parts of her shoulder and her neck that are poking through. And touch some on the parts of her head that are poking through. So all you've done is just added a little bit of color, okay, a little bit of a highlight to that. So now we are going to dry brush highlighting on her bandages, and that means each individual bandage. So you're going to love me now because that's a lot of dry brushing. So just dry brush warm white through the center of each bandage. Wherever you can get your brush in there, dry brush some warm white highlighting on a bandage, do it. You just want to lighten up those bandages. See, they already look better already. If you get on her face, it's okay. Not as picky as I used to be. Used to be very picky. Let's get on this little piece of bandage that's kind of coming off. So just everywhere in the center of a bandage. These two are going to end up, it's just easier to dry brush through the center of the both of them as one. Right. Her neck. And then across her shoulders and chest, wherever there's a bandage. My little turntable makes noise, a lot of noise. I'm sorry. We're also going to dry brush some highlighting on the moon. So you just want to go through the center of the moon. Dry brush some highlighting on the moon. And we're also going to dry brush highlighting on our headstones with warm white. And I'm just going to keep that on the front of the headstone, so you don't have to do the side edges. I'm going to try to get into that cross a little bit, but if you don't, it's okay. I got some on the outside on the blue, but I don't, so it'll be just fine. All right, you can wash your dry brush out. Now, if you only have one dry brush, you want to dry it out really well. And you're going to need some dragon fruit. Or if you don't have dragon fruit, just a nice pink peach color. Pink cheek color. Oh my goodness, I must still be tired. We are going to give her some nice cheeks, and they sit up right on either side of her mouth, next to her nose, under those bandages. And that's dry brushed with dragon fruit. So, little much. So yeah, you're going to go over some of that dry brushed highlighting that you did, but it's okay. So you just want to give her some pretty little cheeks. And you can even, in this little sliver of skin right there, you can dry brush a little bit of dragon fruit in there. Now, her eyes have that straight edge on the top. So what we want to do there is we want to float a highlight with warm white, not a dry brush. This time it's a float, just to highlight that top edge of her eye. And one of them you get the whole thing, the other one you just get just a tiny little sliver. But you want to float that highlight above each eye. We're also going to float warm white highlighting in the top of the ear. So again, a float of warm white. You just want to float this in the very tippy top of her ear. And if they're on the outside edges of the exposed skin, so that would be these places on her head and this little place on her cheek, because these guys don't really, they're not up against, these right here have bandages up against them, but this has just the blue. So wherever her skin is next to the blue, you want to touch a little bit of a warm white highlight. And we also want to go down the side of her face here next to her ear to set her face forward and her ear back. We also want to float warm white in the tip of her nose. She's got a very wide nose, so we want to float inside the nose with warm white. And yeah, I got it on my bandages a little bit. It'll be okay. And I also want to do this part where she has like a little bit of the bridge of her nose showing. So I'm going to turn it this way, right here. And go ahead and float that all the way down onto the bandage. Try not to get a hard edge like that. So it's just a little float, but you take it all the way down onto that first bandage a little bit. Oh, she's starting to come alive. And we also want to float warm white above her mouth, go up and around her lips. So I'm going to go along the smile line and then above the lips and then back up on the smile line. So now you're going to need dried clay. If you don't have dried clay, if you still have some shading flesh, that'll work. But we're going to float some shading on her with dried clay. So just a nice side load float. And let's go. Eventually, this little triangle here on her shoulder is going to get shaded on all three sides. So it kind of gets filled in with dried clay. But for now, let's just get up into that little point. I need a little more color on my brush. Let's do both sides of her neck. And then we'll come back and do the top and bottom of that. Let's do inside the little things, bees on her head where her skin is showing. You can do this little cheek one. You need to do this other little V. Oops. I'm going to go on the skin, not the eyes, on all four sides around this bandage. And this is with dried clay. Blend it out so you don't get just a dried clay line. Here, it's kind of like shading on her forehead under what on normal people would be hair. Let's go on her ear next to her face. And then we can go ahead and go on her face here where her mouth and stuff is. You want to go across there. When you get to the nose, you can go ahead and just go under the nose. And then back across the other side. And yes, you're shading on top of those nice pink cheeks that you did. Cute. So I'm going to shade next to the bandage on the head on both those little sections. Well, 3 sections. So we will have to come back and shade on the other side, but we'll let it dry while we bounce around here. Also want to shade across the bottom of the section that has her eyes in it. Again, just turn your brush on its corner when you get under her eye so you don't get in your whites of your eyeball too much. We want to go under her mouth, under the smile line, and then down the side of the bottom lip till you get to the bandage. You also want to go across that top of that neck thing under what would be her chin. And then you're also going to do the side edge of that little shoulder that's peeking through. There are still a couple places to float shade. So coming back to these peekaboo sections, we want to do the bottom edge now. We want to do these little like eyelids, the things that we floated the warm white on above her eyes. We want to touch a little bit of shading underneath those next to the eyes. It's just a couple little places. Okay, 3 little places to make the eyelid stand out a little bit. We do need to come back and do the nose, so I'm going to let the eyelids dry a little bit. I'm going to do the bottom edge of this peekaboo. I'm going to do the bottom of the mouth area. But I'm not going to go across the lip. If you do, it's okay, because we're going to paint it in. Kind of makes me wish I would have let her be wrapped up completely with bandages. They would be much easier. So then the bottom of the neck area and the other side of the shoulder peekaboo thing. I think we can go back because it's just a little bit of a shade right here next to the bridge of her nose. Whew, that was a lot of little bits of shading. All right, we are going to paint her lips in with a heavy wash of dragon fruit. So just water your paint down a little bit and you paint in the lips with this wash of dragon fruit. I probably could have watered mine down a little bit more. They get painted in completely. I don't wear lipstick, so I'm not very good at putting it on. And now, don't wash your brush out. You can just pick up a little bit of warm white on your dirty brush and make a lighter value of dragon fruit. And then you're just going to just line and touch a little bit of highlighting in her mouth. I treated her mouth like it's two sections, an upper lip and a lower lip. So I want to keep that darker line in the center. So you want to paint in her irises, the colored part of her eye, with Irish moss. And they're pretty big circles. If you have a circle stencil, that'd be great. You can put the pattern on, or you can just wing it. But we want to give her the iris. I paint the whole thing in because the black for the pupil is going to cover up the green. So it's just easier to paint the whole thing in. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it here, which is probably a mistake. Can't talk today. What makes me think I can eyeball an eye? Oh, that was kind of weird. Eyeball an eye. I just want to paint it. It doesn't have to be opaque. We got lots of stuff that goes on top of it. So they're a pretty good size. Let's paint her pupil with lamp black. And it's a pretty big pupil too. So don't be stingy. Okay. And again, if you have a stencil, you could stencil it on. We're going to let that dry. We're going to go back to our mouth, and you're going to need cranberry wine. And we are going to float some shading on our lips with cranberry wine. And this is going to go in the corners of the lips and through the center. So I'm going to do on the bottom lip up against the top lip first. And again, you're probably just going to want to get the corner of your brush in here. So you just want to float little cranberry wine to deepen that separation a little bit. And then I'm also going to touch this just in the corners of her lips. So it's going to go kind of from the top of the lip at the widow's peak, and then down the side of the bottom lip. So I'm going from the top widow's peak into that V corner and then down the side. We're going to take our liner brush and some warm white, just straight warm white. We're just going to touch a little bit of a highlight on the lips. Kind of, got a little bright, so I'm going to tone it down with my finger. So on the bottom lip, I think I should do that a little bit more like that. Okay, so bottom lips and in the widow's peak. We want to float just a little bit of color in the tip of her nose with a soft float of dragon fruit. So just a nice soft float, which that wasn't, of dragon fruit. You just want to touch a little bit of color in the tip of her nose. Back to her eyes. We want to float some very well blended out lamp black. That means you just corner load a tiny bit and blend it on your palette a lot. Walk away from that main line that you blend into so that you can soften that float quite a bit. We are going to float this across the top of the eye, including the iris. So here you're going to float right here. See how nice and soft that lampblack is? So I did it across the top of the eye and next to the bandage on the left eye. And I'm just going to go across the top of the eye on the right side. And that just kind of puts her eyes underneath her eyelids. You're going to need some moon yellow and some Hauser dark green. We are going to line a highlight in her eyes with the moon yellow in the iris of her eye, in that green part. And it's going to go here on the right side on the eye that's covered by the bandage. And it's going to go upper left and in the right side on the right eye. And that's with moon yellow. With your liner brush and Hauser dark green, you're going to line the lower edge of her eye. You're going to line the iris with Hauser dark green in the bottom. Now, if you can still get in your warm white with your liner brush, we want to add some warm white highlights in the pupils. So I'm going to put a warm white highlight right here in each eye. So top right of each eye. And then I'm going to go opposite of it diagonally. And this highlight is going to set on the line between the pupil and the iris. So you just do a little set down that kind of rides the line. Now you want to get out a nice liner brush or one that you have good luck with. And what we're going to do is we are going to outline each eye and add those eyelashes with thin lamp black. So what you're going to do first is do this line that makes her eyelid. Just line it on both sides. Then you can outline the eye, the white part of the eye. Take your time, you don't have to be in a hurry. And then she has some eyelashes, and these are just going to end up on the right eye. So just give her some eyelashes. We're going to call her face done. We get to go to the bandages now. And this is going to go a lot faster than you think it will. You're going to need fawn. If you don't have fawn, you can use mink tan. And we're going to float some shading on all those bandages. So you can be kind of methodical about it. Do the outside edges, or start by doing the outside edges, or start by doing on the bandage that's behind another bandage, whichever is easier for you. I think I'll start with separating the bandages from each other. So you may want to get your picture out and see where that is. But nice soft floats of fawn. And they don't get floated on both sides, a lot of them. So pay attention to that too in the picture. So I'm going across her head now and just separating the bandages from each other, kinda. I really am doing it, not kinda. on these long bandages that go across her face, you separate them from each other, but you also uh, float the outside edge of them. So just get out your picture and look at it. So you can tell what you're supposed to be doing. And actually float wherever you want. If you want to float somewhere that I didn't float, it doesn't matter. I don't mind at all. So it really doesn't take all that long. So just go bandage to bandage. We do have some dried brush shading that we do on the bandages that cover her nose. So don't try to do that just yet. Looking good. The little tail gets shaded right where it comes out of her head. Oh, looking better already. Go on the bandages on her neck to separate them from each other. I'm going to go all the way across the bottom on her because that's going to be behind a hedge. So that one's an easy float. You don't have to think about where to float. And these are dirty bandages. So if you get floating where there shouldn't be, it's okay. They're kind of dirty. Almost done. Think. I just have to go right here. And oh, I have one more to do. Oh, kind of on the sides of her neck too. See, I'm finding places as I go through and look at my picture. Okay. Okay. Now, what I want you to do, and you don't have to do this on every bandage, but what I did is I made some little creases in some of my bandages. And all I did was load my brush just like I was going to uh, do a float. And I think you can see it here. I just kind of drug some color across some of the bandages, not all of them, just to give it a little bit more dimension. So just here and there, wherever you feel like it, add just a little bit, just a few little lines of this um, fawn, just to give it a little bit more dimension and look of bandages that are kind of strung across her face. Especially down on this little one that's the little end that's hanging free. You want to add a few there. I wish I could sing. I try humming, but that's almost as bad as me singing. I want to put a few here. So see, it helps it look more like they're bandages, crinkled up there, making the turns. And like I said, it doesn't have to be everywhere. Thank goodness. I think that's probably good enough. I'll probably put a little bit right there. So there is a little bit of warm white highlighting just to make these bandages stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to float warm white. If there's an edge that I didn't float shading on, I'm going to float a highlight of warm white. So this long bandage here, I'm going to hit it with a float of warm white. And that's just going to make it stand out a little bit more. Here, just a little, and yes, it goes on top of some of your shading, but that's okay. About here. I'm going to go on these outside edges. Some of them I did shading, some of them I'm going to do highlighting. So if you haven't shaded that edge, You want to touch a little highlight on it. This guy needs to be bumped up just a little bit. But what a difference that makes on those bandages. Oh, she does have hair. We have to do that. That's no big deal. So I'm just going to bump up the highlight a little bit on some of these bandages. And not across the whole bandage, maybe. Just here and there. We're going to do this end of this little tail that's hanging out. I might do this little chin part. I'm going to do under her, on her neck, you're going to do the top of the top wrap, but then you do the bottom of the other ones. And against that fawn, it really pops. Okay, let's see, let's do here. So wherever you just want to bump up a highlight on a bandage, add a little warm white float. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. Let's go down this one and this one. I'm going to go the outside edge of these two. And I have to do just these center ones, I think. And I should probably start at the bottom one. That way I won't wipe out my float. Okay. So that's looking pretty good, I think, but I'm kind of prejudiced. Now we do need to dry brush a little bit of shading to form the bridges of her nose, so you can see it under the bandage. So just a little bit of dry brush fawn. Just to make it look like her nose is actually up under that bandage. Doesn't take much. All right, let's finish off our moon. You need honey brown. And you have your moon yellow. You should still be able to get into that. Let's float some shading and add some craters to our moon with honey brown. So I'm going to float all the way around that outside edge or the inside edge. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but just along this inside edge of the moon with honey brown. And I didn't float honey brown on this edge. And then we'll come back and we'll add the craters to the moon. We should give her some hair. So get out your burnt orange, or you can make it any color you'd like. You want to make green hair, if you want to make blue hair, it's fine. So just with burnt orange and a liner brush, make this hair thick enough because we do line a highlight and a shadow on it. But you just want to make some little strands of hair. Yours can be straight or curly, and you can have as much as you like, just keeping in mind that you're going to shade and highlight each strand. So like on this larger thing, I'm going to make this hair come out from underneath the bandage. And it can be wild and crazy. It can be as long as you want it to be, or it can be short. It's completely up to you. Just give her some burnt orange hair. I even gave her a few strands coming out here, just to break up that area a little bit. And she's got some that comes out, peeks out here. And just a couple more coming out of this little spot on her head. And I'm going to turn this. Okay. Now each of those strands of hair, you're going to take your liner brush and moon yellow, and you're going to highlight the tip of each strand. So start at the tip and just pull a little bit of moon yellow to highlight that strand. And if it ends up kind of dry brush looking, that's okay. That's good. But each strand of hair, the tips get a little moon yellow highlight. Otherwise, you don't see them very much. Go over here. It only goes halfway, third of the way up the strand. Okay, and now you're going to take your liner brush and cranberry wine, crack that open, and you're just going to line a little bit of a shadow at the base of each strand. So just deepen up just the root. She has dark roots, not light roots like most of us. Doesn't have to take a long time to do. I'm just adding a touch of cranberry wine at the base of each strand. She has red hair like me. So the moon has some little craters on it. Otherwise, it would look like the sun. So you're just going to go through and add a few craters to your moon. And the way I do that is I just do some little sea stroke floats. Like here's one that goes off the edge. But I'm just going to add a sea stroke float. So I go through and do one side, and then I come back. If it's a crater, I can see the whole thing, then I come back and do the other side with another sea stroke. So don't make them all face the same direction. Kind of tilt them a different way. So just 4 or 5 craters. They don't have to be perfect, because craters aren't. Then I want to come back with my dry brush. So dry it out. Mine's a little damp, so I'm scrubbing it on my towel. And what I want to do is I want to dry brush a moon yellow glow around my moon. So I'm going to just go very light touch. Just add a little bit of a glow around your moon. You can make it go out as far as you want. We're going to work on our headstones. And they get shaded. If you can still get in your Prussian blue, you want to shade them with a mix of Prussian blue with just a touch of lamp black. So 2 little corner loads of corner load of Prussian blue, and then you just pick up a little bit of lamp black to deepen it a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and I'm going to shade these side edges of these tombstones. So just down the side edges to start with. And yes, there is a little side edge on that cross. So don't forget that. If you get off of the headstone a little bit, it's really okay. It's not going to matter. And down the side edges to give them dimension. Go over to the other side. I'll come back and shade to separate them and along the bottom. So I'm going to turn these around. Don't worry too much if you get on the grass. It'll be okay. So I'm just giving them some dimension by shading this Prussian blue and lamp black. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to shade the Prussian blue black mix along the bottoms. Of all of them. And I'm going to shade to separate them from each other. So this little guy here is in front of this guy. So you want to get him popped out in front. And then the cross one is in front of that pointy one too. I like a flat brush. I never could get the hang of an angle. So I like to use a flat brush. It's just what I've done all the time. Now we want to float a few little highlights just to bump them up a little bit. Just like we did on the bandages. So I am going to float a highlight across the top of each headstone. Just to make them stand out and bring them forward a little bit more. And the top of this pointy one. Again, it doesn't have to be a perfect float. These are old headstones. I'm going to go in on this scallopy one And that will bump him ahead on top a little bit. And then across the top of the one with the cross, you also want to touch a little bit of highlight in the top and on the arms of the cross. Okay. Okay, there's some grass. That's this area that's on, I guess I could back up. This area that's on either side of her shoulders and that the headstones are sitting in is grass. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush that area with, so I'm just going to, my drink is getting in the way here. I just want to lighten up that area a little bit with Irish moss. So wherever you can get your brush in, just dry brush a little Irish moss. And then you can dry brush brighter highlighting with moon yellow. So you could even do that, just keep your dirty brush that still has green in it. And you just want to lighten it up here and there, not everywhere. We're going to float some shading with Hauser dark green. And that shading is going to go outside edges, under the headstones, doesn't have to be perfect, and next to her shoulders. And that's with Hauser dark green. So nice little side load float. Let's go next to her shoulders. And you can stop when you get down to the end of her shoulders. I'm going to go upside down. And I want to go tuck some of this shading under the headstones. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're putting grass on top of it. And then you also want to go on the outside edge. I guess we did have Hauser dark green out. Just remembered for the eyes. So I just want to float from the end of the mummy up with Hauser dark green. So now you want to line some blades of grass with your liner brush. I'm going to line some dark ones first. Not a whole lot. I don't know if you can see it in your picture. There's not a lot. We just want to give it the impression that there's grass, not glass. And so I'm going to do it with Hauser dark green first, and then I'm going to do some Irish moss. So especially line it in front of the headstones, and then line a few blades here and there in that open space. So don't make it a career. Here, where the sky meets the grass, you want to line that to break up that horizon line. So I'm just going to go in front of my headstones and bring a little bit down here and there. The grass doesn't get mowed that often at this cemetery. Here we go. In the same way, go ahead and line some lighter grass with Irish moss. Same places, not on top of each other. These are different blades of grass. Some of my grass got kind of fat. Oh well. Now the hedge, I put her behind a hedge. And that's just done. If you remember, if you painted my pet pumpkin with me, this is the same way. We're going to load a flat brush. You're going to load it with Hauser Dark Green on one side and Irish Moss on the other. So one corner gets Hauser Dark Green and one corner gets Irish Moss. And then you just kind of blend it just a touch on your palette. And what I want to do is with the Irish Moss up, I'm just going to set down on the chisel edge and just make a fuzzy little hedge. And as you run out of, you're going to run out of Irish Moss way before you run out of Hauser Dark Green. Just reload your brush into those two colors and just go through and build a hedge. In front of her. And I just kind of twist and turn my brush a little bit so they face a different way. You don't want them all lined up like little soldiers. You want them to overlap a little bit. And just fill up that front area with your brush double loaded. Hauser Dark Green on one side and Irish Moss on the other. And just on the chisel edge of your brush, build that hedge. Now, so I've got a hedge there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little moon yellow on the light side, on the Irish Moss side. I needed some fresh moon yellow out. Of course, it doesn't want to come out of the bottle. So I'm just going to pick up some moon yellow. And I'm just going to mainly across where she is behind the hedge, I'm going to add some lighter tufts of hedge with that moon yellow. So it's still got the Hauser Dark Green in it, but it's just lighter than the Irish Moss, and that really helps to hide that line. So your lettering is just painted with thinned warm white and your liner brush. And I like to flatten my brush out a little bit so that I get a thicker, squarer edge, if that makes sense. I guess if you wanted to try a paint pen, you could. But I'm just going to go through. I like to line my verticals first. And you can see I've had too much caffeine today, so I'm a little shaky. But I'm just going to line my verticals and then I come back and line my horizontals. No fancy lettering on here, just a basic lettering. And you can make yours say whatever you'd like. But anyway, you just want to line this lettering with thin warm white. And after your hedge is dry, you can put the pattern on and line that lettering. And then the last thing you want to do is with thin warm white, you just want to add a little border stripe, and this goes all the way around. So pick a place to start and just add that little border stripe. And that really adds a lot. Okay, so you just slowly add that stripe around the edge. So the only thing you have left to do if you've painted along is finish your lettering and add that border stripe, sign it, add your names and the details to your headstones, and you're all done. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Don't forget, next month is the pocket watch. That'll be project 13. And so I do have a page on my website that you can purchase the surface and supplies that you need. So I hope to see you next month. Anyway, have a great rest of your evening, and thank you again for joining me.